Women are like the ocean. They're deep and they have massive currents and they shift back and forth all over the place. And what they're seeking in a man is the man to be that rock on the shore that they can crash into, and knowing that that rock's not going to go anywhere.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Venus and Mars podcast. You've got your host, Anya Shack. And today I'm coming back with some fun conversations between a man and a woman. So in all the feedback and all the insights that I've gathered from the, 36-ish episodes I've been doing this so far, people love to hear about, the roadblocks, the inconsistencies, the miscommunication, the tension points between men and women and why they happen and what we can do about it. And so intimate relationship is something that is so dear to my heart. It's something that I believe we all crave, man or woman, all of us desperately crave this deep down. And we put up a whole bunch of roadblocks to, kind of keep ourselves protected. And so I'm really excited to welcome one of my favorite men's coaches here with me, Robert Wunderlich. We're going to have a great chat. We're going to talk about relationship, really from boyhood to manhood. And so I love this man. He's a father. He's a husband. He is a men's coach. And what I really love about his mission is that his kind of like thesis is that he's building a method to combat loneliness and isolation by fostering a deep connection to oneself and to others. So Robert, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Anya. I appreciate it.
Love that. So let's just dive right in. No need to beat around the bush. I know you're really interested in loneliness. I know you're really interested in deep connection. What do you think is the biggest hurdle for men when it comes to deep connection with a woman?
Well, I think part of it would be knowing oneself. I think a big, massive roadblock is what lies within us. The interwoven webs of significance of the protective mechanisms that we took on as children, the childhood wounding that could possibly be there, the trauma that could possibly be there. All of those things are informing our relationships at all times. So whether that be friendships with other men, whether that be friendships with women, whether that be intimate relationships with women and or men, any intimate relationship at all, really, or any relationship at all, those are all things that can be tied to how we came up. So I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that our actions and the way that we create distance are all informed by all of those things.
Gotcha. So I love that you specifically spoke to creating distance. I think that a lot of the people that listen to the show find themselves very intimately aware of this whole idea of the unavailable person, right? The person that like pushes you away. And I think that happens on both the man and the woman side. And I think, one of my favorite lessons and learnings of my life has been like, if someone unavailable you're being attracted to someone that's unavailable, you better believe you yourself are also unavailable.
1000%.
So that's just like a great thing to know. What do you think is like this, this idea of when a man is unavailable, when he becomes unavailable? Like, take me a little bit through like your maybe journey around like being interested in deep love or being not ready for it, and like how did that go for you, like maybe from boyhood onwards?
I mean, I think everybody, for most men, their first love is their mother, right? Their first. So I came up in a household, in a family system where a lot of enmeshment occurred. a lot of codependency. So those are things that I've had to work through. So when I sought an intimate partner growing up, that's what led, right? So
Mm,
codependency, enmeshment, feeling like um, never being enough. So, through that process, I definitely am a recovering nice guy. So having
mm,
a lot of covert contracts and expectations that were built out of my own head and never communicating those things, never communicating my needs,
mm.
and then allowing that anger and that resentment to build through time. And that's where I feel for myself and in my own experience, that's where some of the greatest distance occurred was, a lack of communication, a lack of, a lack of an ability to have hard conversations.
Totally. That makes a lot
So
of
it's
sense. And
truly learning how to build that muscle of not only being able to do it in a non-violent way to where, you're being a jerk and I don't like the way that you're treating me and this is truly
yeah.
harming me, to, hey, when I feel that um, when this happens, I feel like sad or I feel upset or I feel like, you know, you don't really care about me, but this is my feelings. This is how I feel. It's not a projection onto you.
Yeah.
And is this something that you're willing to, come together with and actually work through? So utilizing a little bit more nonviolent communication. And that stuff's hard. Having boundaries, another huge piece,
Yeah.
being able to express those boundaries, being able to hold that space. And most importantly, it's for self first. I mean, most boundaries, like you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that when you find someone else that's unavailable and you're seeking that person, you're almost always unavailable yourself also. Well, I would say the kind of same thing lies when we think about, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. But so in thinking about boundaries, we go to this space where we abandon ourselves first and we don't hold that boundary for ourselves first.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? So then we seek someone who will just continually run over that boundary and we wonder why, but in reality, it's us not upholding that boundary to begin with. And we kind of let the curtain down and then we wonder why that boundary continues to get crossed, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. No, I love that you're speaking on really important things, like kind of recovering nice guy, covert contracts, enmeshment. I think these are all like very important terminologies to understand. And I'd love to kind of like unpack them a little bit more, but can we kind of go to the beginning when you talked about there was a lot of enmeshment with my mother? Can you explain that just like for people that might be new to like understanding like the mother wound or the father wound? Like what are some of the things that you like realized occurred as you were a boy that then led on to like some of those lacks of boundaries and all of that you were talking about?
Part of it for myself and through my own journey was the expectation to be the man of the house.
Ah, okay.
Um, I was in third grade when my parents divorced, and then I had my sister and my mother. So
Mm,
very much I was elevated to almost man status immediately in some ways.
mm,
Obviously, seen as the boy at the same time. So it's this weird dichotomy when you're in that space to where you're still
mm,
coddled and held and, like in that sense. So don't want any harm to happen to you, which is, I feel, a part of enmeshment. And then
mm-hmm,
on top of that, also elevating, like my mom never let me go into a mall or into a store without opening the door for her, everything along those lines, to
mm,
where it's like we have this weird space to where I'm no longer a child in some ways, and then I'm always a child in another. Does that help make
yeah,
sense?
yeah.
And then another piece of enmeshment for me is if I'm not okay, you're not okay. And vice versa. If you're
Oh,
not okay,
yeah.
I'm not okay.
Mm, that's
So
huge.
that so how those things come, ping off of each other. So my emotional investment is like, if you're not okay, Anya, then man, I'm totally disturbed inside myself. I have no there's no separation between the two of us.
That's right. There's no separation. All of like mom's wounds, issues, feelings are all directly like coming to life through you.
Yep.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. So then lead me to what a covert contract is.
I guess I'll just add for that last
Yeah.
piece,
Yeah.
is that, and then it's the reinforcement of don't ever be like your father.
Right.
You're acting like your father. Things along those lines is another way that some of that stuff kind of transpired for me,
Yeah.
personally.
Right.
And it's, and all of this being said with all of the grace and
Yeah.
compassion in the world, right? That I love my mother, that I'm
Yeah.
grateful for everything that she did for me, that I'm absolutely amazed with what she did with myself and my sister and everything that she fought for her and I, to have some of the life that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure that that's important to say,
Yeah.
because I think that we can carry these wounds from our childhood, and then we can, I don't want to say objectify, but like we can villainize our
Oh
parents
yeah.
in some ways,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And then we continue to get wounded by that process over and over and
Right.
over again
Right.
because we see it in that light. Whereas I think it's really important that there's a ton of grace, there's a ton of compassion, there's a ton of understanding that my mom absolutely 100% did the best that she could with what she had. And
Totally.
I had a great childhood in many ways. I'm not trying to sound like, a bunch of horrible things happened to me. And these are things that I understand as an adult man now that they're mine to own and they're mine to work through. So when many times I speak about these things, it's not necessarily that I think that about my mom in that negative light. It's that I understand that these are things that I myself am working through because they're mine to own and there's no one else that's going to do it for me.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's always kind of my come from as well. Sometimes we just have to like put on hold our like my parents did the best that they could so that we can understand, and then we understand,
100%.
and then we go back to our parents did the best we could once we get it, and then we kind of move forward.
100%. I just want to make sure and
Yeah,
clarify that, like,
yeah,
because it can sound, because I listen to other podcasts and I can listen to other things, and it's just sometimes it can sound like people are just dogging on their parents many
totally.
times.
It's not that.
Yeah, those things happen, and yes, those wounds are valid, and yes, those things led, to different relationships through life, all of that stuff. And also, there's that piece where I also see my mom in a wonderful light, and I also see
Yeah,
her in a space where, I'm very grateful for her.
I love that. That's beautiful. We love our parents. I fully support that. We completely love our parents and are super grateful for what they've done for us. But I'm so grateful for the opportunity and the tools to unpack like the things that didn't work and then fix them. And so I think that's awesome. I love how you just said all that.
So, but yes, covert contracts.
Please.
Covert contracts are, so some of the best examples that I've ever heard, and I'm going to use a little bit of language here, so I hope that's
Cool.
okay. But it's like that guy that that always comes over and hangs out with you as a woman, but always is kind of in that friend zone, never really expresses that he has interest in you.
Yeah.
Will come over and be like, "Hey, I'll help you move." The whole time in his mind, he's thinking about, "Oh, if I help her move, then she'll want to fuck me." Or if I help her move, then she'll
Yeah.
want to suck my dick. Or if and I'm
Yeah.
using this kind of vulgar in a way
Yeah.
example, but that's what happens. That's something that, I have experienced in my younger life.
Yeah.
So, and in relationship myself, that we build these covert contracts. It's not a contract that's said between you and I. Like, hey, I would like to, not you and I, but like I'm saying between you and anyone else, in the sense of like when I started to date my wife, hey, I want to date you.
Yeah. Totally.
And I have interest in you, and you are somebody that I see a lot of value in. And at some point I would like to have a physical relationship with you if that's something that you're interested in. And I want to do it consciously. I mean, man, all the tools that I have now are
Yeah.
so much different than what I had when I
Yeah.
was in the dating realm and when I first met my wife.
So then two questions. Why would someone want to create a covert contract? Like why would a man want to do that? Like what's he thinking in his brain? And then number two, what's a good example of like a woman creating a covert contract? So curious.
Ooh. Um, you're gonna put me on the spot, aren't you? Um, so I don't know if it's a want. I think in some instances, men that are kind of in the ilk of wanting to go out and party, wanting to go out and, like the count, just looking to add to the count,
Sure.
looking to create, like experiences that they just want to go out and have sex with women and don't really want to have relationship or things along those lines. I think that they can build covert contracts that are through want. And then I think that in other cases, it's not necessarily through want, that it's just the mechanism that they haven't been shown how to properly communicate to where, and the biggest thing that they fear is shame.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that they fear is rejection.
Right.
So when every time you get rejected, you feel shame because, oh, I'm not obviously not. So then those things build. And over time, you're just like, well, what's the point? And then you don't express yourself because you've been, in some cases battered
Mm,
through the
mm,
dating sphere. You put yourself out there and then you get rejected, and then you put yourself out there and you get rejected. And, like you express that you like somebody and then that person just completely shuts you down or shames you
mm.
and makes you feel really bad, like really
Yeah.
bad for expressing that and becoming vulnerable. I think those are all mechanisms that kind of lead to men having that opportunity to create covert contracts, if that makes sense.
Totally. That's why, like, as you were speaking, I was like, you know what? That's why people like Jordan Peterson are so great for men, just because, like, the whole message is like, learn from those rejections and, like, make yourself better. Like, learn from all those experiences and just go back and, like, make yourself better. And I promise you won't get rejected as much the better you become, the more confident you become, all these things. But it sounds like the men that continue to do this, like, they're not in a growth mindset.
Well, no, and I would say that I think men have they don't feel like they can be themselves in many cases either, because
Hmm.
societally we are putting men in a very, very small container. That anything outside of this very small box is toxic, or anything out of this very
Mm,
small box is seen as you're objectifying a woman or you're sexualizing somebody, or like
mm.
it's this very tiny little box. So
Got
it's
it.
not just like men are being attacked for just being a man.
Yeah, totally. It's a lot of fear-based stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. To where they're being shamed for just the way they were biologically born.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, it's so true. I've heard crazy things like it's toxic masculinity, guys lifting at the gym, and I'm just like, what is wrong with you people? Like,
Oh man, I wish I had the article in front of me, but there was an article in Psych about toxic masculinity, and it said something along the lines of stoicism is toxic
oh my
masculinity
God,
and competitiveness is toxic
the worst.
masculinity because it's like so aggressive. And it's no, that's not toxic masculinity. In fact,
Yeah,
I don't believe that there is toxic masculinity. I think there's
yeah,
just toxic people in general
yeah,
that behave in toxic ways, um,
yeah.
through their own unhealed wounding and trauma and unawareness of the things that are happening within themselves.
So then would you say that, like, kind of going back to like growing up with dad not being around, it's like all those all those like masculine values like competitiveness, like discipline, like standing up for yourself, all that stuff, like wasn't as like important maybe in the upbringing, so it seems like maybe some of the men that like do kind of feel afraid of their own masculinity like just try to downplay it.
Well, I think it's also suppressed too.
Right.
They're told, like for the example that I was told, like, don't be like your dad,
Right.
like, oh, don't be like those men are
And what did that
bad.
mean? Like, don't be like your dad. Like what? Like, what was your dad?
Um, my dad, he he was a yeller. He was a aggressive
Right.
person. He was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So, um, he
Oh,
was recovering.
yeah.
Um, so he got sober and then actually divorced my mom and then remarried a couple months later.
Mm,
So, unfaithful,
yeah.
um, a lot of various things that, created a lot of wounding for my mom, a lot of wounding
Yeah.
for myself, a lot of wounding for my sister. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Um, so not being that, so that meant I couldn't have anger. I needed to suppress it.
Mm,
But
mm,
I think you and I both would agree that anger is actually a healthy, it's a healthy experience. It's something that
yeah.
can be healthy and it can be expressed in a vibrant and, open way to where we still have access to our heart when we're doing it. Like, hey, I'm really upset right now. I'm actually pissed off. And it's
Totally.
totally okay that I'm pissed off. Like I totally disagree with the choices that you may have made in this moment.
Yeah.
And I'm angry.
Yeah.
Where anger where we create this misnomer with anger is the difference between anger and aggression.
Yeah.
Aggression doesn't have access to heart. Aggression doesn't have access to our space here to where we can't do it lovingly. In fact, the whole purpose of aggression is to suppress,
Yeah.
is to demean, is to belittle, is to create something small to smush, the other person in some way, to
Yeah.
wound the other person. So just understanding learning that difference and later in my life has created you know, it's a much different approach that I have to life now, to like understanding like,
Mm,
oh man, I'm being aggressive, and I actually just did this last weekend. I got upset with my kids because, they're kids and
yeah.
they do things like put toothpaste in water and then, put it in, brother's hair and stuff. So
Yeah.
and I was upset and then like my son really didn't appreciate it too much and got upset back at me and I explained to him that I was angry and then I also admitted that at a certain point I shifted over to aggression and that's where I needed to repair with him. So I
Sure.
sat with him and just looked him in the eye and apologized for being aggressive with him, which I could tell wounded him. And I did my best to repair to him and explain that at first daddy was I was angry, and then I allowed myself to move into a space of aggression, and that I could understand why he felt the way he did.
Mm. Look at just the way that people are parenting these days. It's so incredible. The ones with the tools, it's just a
It's
whole
hard.
different ball game than what we experienced.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, we have to we have to also, I mean, we can look back at history with 2020 vision way too often and just be
totally.
like, oh, well, why couldn't they just done better and all these
Right.
things. But
Right.
like my parents at least were the result of the generation that had to go and fight in World War II. Like
Yeah.
there was no real space for emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, at, in many cases at that time. And if you're 18, 19, 20 years old and you're going to fight at in the European front or over in the Pacific front, and you didn't have space for emotion.
Mm-mm.
So you learn that at a young age, and that's how you thought life was supposed to be for the remainder of your life is just
Yeah.
very stoic, very no, don't show any emotion, don't cry,
Yeah.
don't be vulnerable. Because if I'm vulnerable, man, the next corner I could go around, someone may try to kill me.
Yeah. Totally. No, you're spot on. And I wanted to go really quickly before I forget back to something you said when you were talking about like all the things that your dad was. And it just had me think about how that is just like an exhibit A of what we do in our culture, where we take we throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it's like masculinity is lumped in with addict, alcoholic, violent, cheater, and all this stuff. And it's like, it's so heartbreaking because we're missing the nuance, we're missing the layers, we're missing all of the like magic that is masculinity. And I know you know what that is. I know what that is. And so I just like, I guess I'm wondering, like, what did you learn later on in your life about like maybe some of the things you were missing as a boy in regards to masculinity?
I think I'm still learning them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, um, how to build something, both physical form and internally, how to build yourself, how to without having any rites of passage, and lack of elders, I would say that those relationships, lack of mentors, we miss a lot of those things of what it means to be a man. And then we're also shown some poor examples of what it means to be a man. So we can latch on to some of those things and take them a little too far. But man, what I'm missing, kind of to take something from, my work with Traver Boehm, is just that understanding of the primal and the divine. I had to go out and find my primal on my own. I didn't really have a lot of that primal shown to me in many ways. So that's a big, big reason why I started training jujitsu and why I continue to do jujitsu,
What is the
is
primal?
access. So to me, the primal lies in our gut,
Okay.
and below, right? In our balls. Like that's that power that leads us. That's that unshakable knowing that we're going to survive this. That ability to smash something if we absolutely have to, with all the desire not to. But if it needs to go there, that we can go there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That we're not, that's where the structure lies within the masculine, in my opinion.
I love that. Because literally, I remember going just to get food with a friend last weekend, and I experienced this, what you're talking about. And from the female side, like maybe this is, so we sat down, and next to us was this table of just like, kind of like, just like dead people, right? In the sense where they were just like no aliveness, no energy, in their phones, and just overweight. And just like, I felt like, man, if some shit goes down right now, like I'm the warrior, like I'm the one like that has to handle it. Like there's no one else. And then literally 10 minutes later, this like family walks in, and the dad is like ripped. He's alive. He's awake. It's not even about his physical. It's mostly that he was just, you could tell like his primal was so activated. So he sat down, and me and my girlfriend, we were just like,
Shoulders dropped.
It just felt so nice to have this man be sitting in the room, not even close, but just in the room. It was amazing.
Grounded.
Yeah.
I would say, the primal is an example of how grounded men can be. With my family, like my wife always tries to sit facing the door, and I'm always like, no, you need to move. You need to sit over here so I can see the door. It's just all these different things mindset wise, and having done self-defense and taught self-defense for so long, that, these are things that I think about. Every time I walk into a store, I think about where the exits are. I look at where the exits are. Like it's just a habitual thing. So I think those are little tiny small examples of what, the primal is just that preparedness to handle something if necessary, which also is beautiful in relationship, because the primal can say, that's where we get that gumption to actually say what our needs are.
Yep.
Hey, I'm really scared to express my needs because it's going to make me really vulnerable, and as much as that's going to make me vulnerable, it's going to come from this space. It's going to come from my belly. I'm going to actually express this because it needs to be expressed instead of holding it in this tiny little shell. Does that make sense? And
Oh yeah.
then through that, it's expressed through our heart now too, because that's where the vulnerability is. It's now, hey, the mechanism that actually creates the conversation comes from our guts, but it passes through, right, the heart space, because in order for us to actually have that conversation, we got to get really vulnerable.
That's beautiful. Robert, that's beautiful. And you just helped me think of something. I think a lot of guys are like, okay, I'm going to try to be vulnerable. And then they do. And then the person that they're with is like, I didn't want all this. And I know that happens all the time. And I think what you're speaking to might be the unlock. It's like, it sounds to me like the times when the women are not receptive to it is when maybe there's no primal connection and it's just spilling of emotions without coming from like a source of groundedness.
I think that to be true. I think that just from your experience, Anya, like when you feel the man be wish-washy on the other side when they're expressing themselves, like there's no floor, there's no grounding, there's no, what do you, it just feels like it's a waterbed, of stuff underneath him.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? And then, well, I was really sad when you told me this, and I didn't really appreciate when, what does that feel like to you, even just me expressing it like that?
It feels like I have to like grab a spear because no one else is going to do it. Like I need to like handle life now. And it's just so frustrating and upsetting.
I appreciate that answer. But I think it's true. Yeah. I think that when it comes from a space of, hey, this is truly me. This is me putting myself out there, but this is a place. I think you can see in my demeanor now, you can feel you can hear the tonality in my voice, how much it's changed.
Yeah.
There's not, for lack of a better term, any softness. And I'm not calling anybody soft, because I think that's something that we're told as men that produces some of this.
Right.
Is, hey, stop being soft.
Right.
And then now we've created more of a shell, and now we've created more, that person, that man, to shrink even more. So I don't want to make sure that that's clear, that I'm not speaking to any men that they're soft. And it just, so having that scale between being supple, right, which would be relaxed and movable, and if that scale's too far over to that supple side, or as my mentor Dewey says, softness, if we're on too far on that side, and sometimes we need it, sometimes we need to be on that far. So like, for instance, if you're in relationship and being able to hold a container for, say, your partner, and she really needs to just dump, and your ability to just stay soft in that moment and just listen, not try to fix, not try to, create problem solve or anything along those lines, but to just hear and witness the emotion of them and allow them to pour into that cup, knowing that underneath that cup is something that's stable, that it's going to be held, and it's going to be what's the word I'm looking for? That it's going to be a container that truly, I'll just say is held.
I love that.
So
no, that's great.
Does that make sense? But then on the other side, then if we have too much structure, then it's I think we get into the realm beyond structure and get into rigidity. And these are terms that I use in jiu-jitsu to explain a lot of things through jiu-jitsu. So if we're a little too supple, then we're just like little noodles and people can just do whatever they want to us. If we have too much, if we go beyond structure and we get into rigidity to where now everything is tense, our whole body is tense. Now there's no communication happening in our own body. If I'm rigid, so it's an example would be like me wanting to hold your wrist so tight that I'm activating quarter of my body just to make sure that I can hold your wrist. But in fact,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm so rigid, it actually allows you to break that grip
Right.
more easily than it would be
Right.
if I had structure or if I had some suppleness, even to
Right.
just now I can be responsive. So rigidity creates reactivity. Too much softness or too much suppleness creates just it's like the dancing people that you see that have the fans that are the marketing on the corner that a brand new store
Yeah.
opens and they're little floppy. It's like
Yeah.
you don't want that. I don't think anybody
Yeah,
wants that.
for sure. No, I love that. Okay, so we talked about the primal, really clear about that. What's the difference between suppleness and the divine?
So suppleness is, I would say, on the side of the divine.
Okay, so
Remaining, right? Having access to me, the divine is heart.
okay.
For men, we live primarily here in our head,
Yeah.
especially during the week. We probably live below the waist over the weekend if you're single and, or in relationship and maybe you're not expressing your needs. So you're not living there at all. And we really miss this space in the middle.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the divine is being able to be vulnerable, being open and understanding of, like I said, the divine is that space where we get to hold that container, that we get to see someone for who they are, that we get to respect and truly love who they are, and then also just understanding the divine is not just in relationship, but it's earth, it's mother, it's what we don't know. It's all those questions, it's hard to explain, right? It's this
Yeah,
just amorphous, kind of flowy
unknown.
system of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Where it's confusing. And I say that as a man because, the divine, like for men, a lot of times we're scared a lot of times by the divine, I would say that we fear that um, it just feels like this massive swell in the ocean,
Yeah.
are you what is her name, Josephina,
Sophie
last name
Josephina?
Josephina? Yeah, Sophie
Yeah.
Josephina, the ways that she described um this basically was that women are like the ocean.
Hmm.
They're deep and they have massive currents and they shift back and forth all over the place. And what they're seeking in a man is the man to be that rock on the shore that they can crash into and knowing that that rock's not going to go anywhere.
Yep. It's a perfect way to say that. I love that. So, um, I guess my question is, you talk about the divine and like the fear that might be surrounding that. What do you think, like, I guess maybe young boys or maybe like young men are afraid of when it comes to a woman?
Yeah, and I guess I'll just go back to that piece that when you're ungrounded,
Yeah.
when you're just as much the storm as everything around you, then it is very scary and it is fearful. But when you learn how to be grounded, when you learn how to get into your body, when you learn how to access your belly, that fire in your belly, and be
Uh-huh.
able to ground yourself and be more of the fence post, then things around you don't necessarily scare you as much, right? That a wave of something can crash over you, and because you're still, because you're your rock, that rock on that shore, then you're able to handle that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So for a man that's not grounded, then what is that? What is it that's so scary about a woman?
Well, if they're not grounded, then they're just in much chaos as the woman is, right? And I don't mean chaos in
Mm,
a negative connotation. It's
uh-huh.
just that, like I tried to describe it earlier,
Totally.
it's in constant motion, right? So it's not a dig on femininity at all. It's for lack of better term to really kind of illustrate how the feminine can just, it's so pliable, it's so movable, it shifts in so many wonderful
Mm,
ways,
mm.
you know?
Got it. So what you're essentially saying is that you can't really see the beauty of the shift if you're not grounded yourself. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So another way to think about it is like men are the mountain and women are the storm. And if you're the mountain, you don't really care how big the storm gets because you're a fucking mountain.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Right. But if you're the storm, if you're another storm with another storm, then you feel no tie to the ground. You feel just like you've lost your ability to or you've lost your anchor per se.
So I'd argue that there are quite a bit of not mountains in the world that are men. And a lot of relationship problems arise out of those situations, right?
Guilty.
Rob is raising his hand. Okay. So what are those I guess, give me like one or two of those problems that you really encountered before you were able to find the primal and to find the stability. Like, what were two things that really just like, you just like kept on dealing with when it came to the opposite sex?
Resentment.
For her, like resentment towards her.
Yes.
Okay.
And towards me and towards myself.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't think in some ways, I don't think you can have resentment. I think resentment towards others, there's a large component that you carry within yourself. If that makes sense, that as that builds, you're disappointed because you didn't say anything, but then that just continues to, it's just all a projection.
Yeah.
So in many respects, you're really upset with yourself for not taking the steps that you know are necessary to express yourself or to have a hard conversation or do something along those lines. So, but instead of actually owning it here, you just project it onto the other.
Love that. So here's like a great example. I have heard this so many times and it just makes me cringe. It makes me cringe. So like, for example, a group of guys are like hanging out, or there's even a group of different people, maybe even women are a part of the group too. And there's this like invitation to go like spend the weekend or play golf or whatever. And the dude right away is like, I want to be there, but my wife, like, I can't. And like, she just like my wife she like won't let me, my wife. And it's like all this resentment is coming out. And it's like, it makes me cringe because like life doesn't have to be that way, but most people think that's how life is. Can you explain what the hell is happening in this scenario?
One of the worst things that have ever, like one of the worst terms that's ever been coined in the history of humankind, happy wife, happy life.
Totally. Yeah. It goes right along with ball and chain. Same thing.
Yep. I mean, it's a disaster zone. It is just setting you up for disaster when you have that kind of mentality, because then you completely self-sacrifice. You give up everything of yourself for the relationship. Happy spouse, happy house. Meaning that now both individuals are in line with themselves.
Yeah.
They both feed into their relational cup. So now there's going to be that cycle to where individual, now we are on the same page. We're both responsible here. Maybe I saw a really great thing by Brene Brown the other day, to where she was talking about how her and her husband have conversations where they do these little check-ins. And it's someday I would love to have this with my own wife. Like, hey, I'm running at like 30%.
Yeah, I heard that one.
Like, can you please? And then, hey, I got a lot of energy. Yes, I can take that 70% on. We're good.
Yeah.
And then sometimes he would come home and she'd be like, man, I'm running at 10%. Hey, I got this extra 90%. No problem. I can take it.
Yeah.
And then she said something really, really beautiful, that when they both are in those spaces where he might be at 20 and she might be at 30, then they sit down and have a conversation about their needs and what they actually need in that moment. So then there is no resentment built, that there is nothing, no kind of conflict that's bore from it, that they just have a lot of grace and compassion and understand that, like, man, he's sitting at a 20, I'm sitting at a 30.
Yeah.
We still have all these things to do, but let's just lay out the list in priority and be able to do this with some grace and compassion for each other. So yeah, that's what I would say is an example of.
So then my question is, you're talking about how the example I shared about the guy with the golf, like you're talking about how it's like happy wife, happy life. So is the point here that he's telling his buddies he's annoyed with his wife, but he's going home and not telling her that he's annoyed? Is that what you're saying is happening?
That part of it. And that's part of the covert contract too, is like, he's not expressing his needs.
Right. Right.
That,
how did it get to that point? How did it get to that point?
It started that way.
Right.
You know, those things weren't expressed from the beginning. I mean, the honeymoon phase is great because everything, you know, like, oh, great. Yeah. Well, I love you, so go do it. And then slowly but surely, I mean, how many people have you heard get divorced over the fact that somebody didn't put away their toothbrush?
Right. Absolutely.
Not the toothbrush.
Not at all.
Nothing to do with the toothbrush.
It's never the toothbrush or the trash or all the stuff people argue about. Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. So go ahead.
Well, and can you ask that question again? So he's going home, and I think sometimes I would say that he doesn't actually want to go golfing with his friends. That he would prefer to go home and spend some time with his wife and his family, but he doesn't want to also get all of the flack from his buddies either, that like, oh, well, of course you go, you know, like all of the razzing and the kind of shit that we give each other as men in some cases, you know? So I think in some ways that can happen also, that it's not necessarily resentment towards his wife, that sometimes he doesn't want to then express something to be vulnerable in front of his friends and be like, but if he's doing that with his friends, it's almost a guarantee that he's doing that with his wife also.
You know, that makes me think of just like the paradigm. It's just like the cultural paradigm of opposition, like the battle of the sexes. So it's almost like the guys, you know, standing around talking about how their wives are being annoying is the same as like women standing around talking about how their husbands are lazy. It's like it happens on both sides, and it's just like it almost feels like what's the word I'm looking for? Like some sort of pledge of allegiance we all like buy into, that you just like have these conversations.
Well, and I think I've heard a lot of women also express that they feel that they have to take care of their husbands, like on just a totally different level in today's society. Emotionally, physically.
Yeah.
It's not like the paradigm from the 50s where she's at home cooking and cleaning and you know, taking care of the family and, you know, that whole kind of the way that we look on the past. But it's, man, I've got to make sure that all his appointments are taken care of. And I got to make sure that I call the doctor to make sure that he is, you know, that he goes to the doctor and
my God,
things along those lines. That
is that like not just sense? Like the mom issues, like playing out, like, oh my God, because there are way less dads, you know, that have been present in families over the last few decades. So I'm not surprised that there's so much mothering going on.
And then now, you know, now in relationship, they want you to be mother. I hear that as that's a major complaint that I hear from women.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's something that you can corroborate or not through your experiences, but
yeah, I mean, I definitely see it. I see it happening all over the place. I definitely see like the female taking on the leadership role of the household, because, well, she doesn't trust a man to do it, and he hasn't ever stepped up until this point. So what makes her think that he would? And then it builds this like, but the thing is she married him anyway because she thought that that's all that like, that's what life is. That's what life is. That's how things are. Like, she doesn't know what a strong, capable, like, head of the household masculine man is. That hasn't been popular for a few decades.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we can go on
So
probably a big rant on that, but
I have a huge rant on that too, but that's okay. Next time.
but I think that also it creates a lack of safety.
Yeah.
And when we describe the primal creates, that's where safety is created, because
Right.
if the primal is being able to be in yourself and be grounded and be secure as an individual, then the partner, most of the time in heterosexual relationships, she's going to feel safe.
Yeah.
To where he's not movable. If he's immovable, right? Not in a way where he doesn't have access to his heart, immovable,
Yeah.
but he's
Yeah.
not moving, in getting pushed around, and just is fleeting, and just a little 1 mile an hour breeze can knock him over. That doesn't create much safety.
Yeah.
And through my experience, the number one thing that almost every woman has ever said about relationship is they want to feel safe.
Totally. It's the number one thing of every woman I've ever spoken to. Okay. And I'm going to say something that's like slightly controversial. People don't like this, but that's fine. I stand by it. I think that's why people like Andrew Tate are really important for society right now. Like, I don't think he's like he's connected to like the deep union that I believe in. And like, he's not this man that's going to like be with one woman. He's like really interested in more of like a polygamous like lifestyle, and that's fine. But he is teaching so many young men to find their groundedness. That's literally his only message. It's literally just like, find your footing, like figure yourself out, make money, like be on your, like be strong. That's literally all he's telling them. And I just think that it takes someone like that to really rally a lot of people.
Um,
That's my point of view.
and I respect your point of view,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I disagree in many ways.
Yeah.
I think that Andrew Tate is pretty dangerous personally. Just with the messaging that he puts out like that creates this space for, young boys and young men to go, and then there's just that undertone, you know, man, that's how a lot of this stuff is done. Is 90% of it is really good messaging.
Yeah.
95% of it's really good messaging, and then it's the subvert 5% that creates some
Exactly.
issue, if that makes sense.
I
So
just,
in my opinion,
yeah.
I feel like he's a great marketer. I think he's a great, like he puts himself out there in that way.
Yeah.
And that's what I would just say about him in general, is that I think that it's a slippery slope. Um, I personally do not think that he has access to his heart. I don't think he comes from a space from his heart. I think that's what he's lacking.
Totally. But you know what? I think it's someone that's coming from their heart for some reason is not like, it's almost like the pendulum has to swing all the way to like start the movement, and then like the heart like starts to come through with other men, with different men, with people that have like a more focused and a more heart-centered message. It's almost like a gradual thing, which is, so I agree with you 100%, but I do think he's like the catalyst for some of this stuff.
Well, he's popular, and I think when you have that, so
Yeah.
basically, I mean, what you're kind of describing is like Foucaultian sociology, right? So Foucault was a French sociologist, and he really posits that it's the polar opposites, that actually it's the ends of the spectrum that move forward, right? So for instance, we'll just use the political system as an example. So the
Sure.
far left and then the far right, and they're extreme on the ends, and then those ends move forward, and then it kind of moves the rest of the
Yeah.
middle
Yep.
forward.
Yeah,
And that I think is something that we could all agree on.
totally. Totally.
Possibly, I don't know if everyone would agree with that,
That's
but
okay.
yes, I think that
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of good people out there, though, that are coming forth with a message that's from the heart also. I think that the work that, like I
Yeah.
said, Traver Boehm does, the
Yes.
work that Connor Beaton does, Mark
Yes.
Groves, um,
Love it. Love all
uh,
those men. Wonderful.
Jeremy, Jeremy Goldberg, like all of these guys are truly coming from a space of being very well grounded. Sylvester McNutt,
Yes.
like Brandon Collins, like there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Stefandos, like all of these men that are truly grounded, have access to their primal, have access to the divine, can think, they have equal in access to their head, their heart, and their balls, like Traver likes to say, and
Yep.
that's just something that those are the messages that I truly think need to be out there more.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and it's one of those things. It's like, I mean, why do we always vote for these people that are kind of on the polar opposites?
Totally.
Because like,
Totally.
how many times have you come to an end of an election in the last 10, 20 years and been like, these are the people we get to choose from?
I
Like,
know. I know
how is
it.
this possible? But I think that's part of the system and part of the paradigm that we live in today is and unfortunately it's the dehumanization of other.
Yeah.
That, you know, for instance, what we just did, I don't look at you any differently because of your opinion, Anya,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You and I can have a discussion and we can have a debate and we can
Totally.
truly, have a wonderful conversation. And I'm still going to walk away from this conversation seeing you in the same view that I've always seen you. And I think
Totally.
that you would say the same. And that's where we need to get more to as a
Mm.
society.
Mm-hmm.
That I see that in relationship. We dehumanize women, we dehumanize men.
Yeah.
It's us versus them. Like
Yeah.
tribalism is crazy right now. I mean, it's infiltrating everything. There's just
Yeah.
these ridiculous arguments that, like, what happened to the ability to hold
Yeah.
a conversation, a debate, and then also
Right.
one of the greatest signs of intelligence to me is paradox. Can you
Yeah.
actually have, can you hold a paradox? Can you understand that there can be two things that are completely on opposite ends of the spectrum
Yeah.
and they both be true at the same time?
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Gosh, I just love how beautifully you express that. And that made me feel so seen and just like understood because sometimes it's so hard to like, you have an inkling, you have an idea about something, you believe something, and but you believe it and you also think that the opposite is true as well in the same sentence. So it's like, yes, I think there are aspects of Tate that are great and there are aspects of Tate that are not so great, and that's okay. And it's like, wow, cool. Like Winston Churchill like was probably one of the greatest leaders of our time and an alcoholic. Cool. Like we can say that and it's okay.
Man, there's not a time in history where like someone that was great didn't have something else about them.
Totally. Totally.
I
Gosh, I
mean,
love that. Ugh.
there's there's so many aspects to that I think are so true that we all have other aspects to us. We all have things that lie beneath the surface. We all have these ideas. And I think that, you know, part of all of this, and that kind of leads into this conversation too, is just, I put a post up not too long ago that victimization is the main aspect for violence,
Oh yeah. I could see that. I really do see that.
that it is the
Mm,
biggest catalyst for violence.
mm,
Now, that doesn't mean that there's not victims. There absolutely are victims.
right.
And it's what you do with it after. I mean, I'm an example of it. And, I got hit by a drunk driver and I
Mm,
played that victim card for a very long time. And
mm,
it like it sowed a lot of resentment. It sowed a lot of aggression, violence,
yeah.
all of it.
Man, I can feel you so deeply because like I also played the like, oh yeah, I have like father wound. I have father wound. So like that's why I'm the way I am thing for such a long time. And then I did the Traver Boehm like name your year, and this is my year of new stories. And I can tell you right now that I have had a completely new story all year around that. And then what happened? My actual relationship with the person in question changed completely. So, like, amazing. Yeah,
The language we use shapes our experience,
I love that. You've said that to me before, and I love that. I always remember those words that you've said to me.
so it's totally true. So the language we use shapes our experience. I am a victim. I am
Right,
victim
right.
versus I've been victimized
Sure.
and now it's mine to own and now it's mine to work through. And, Dewey Freeman, my mentor, he said the moment you end become, being a victim is the moment that you begin to heal.
Yeah, that's great.
And you were wounded in relationship and you will heal through relationship.
Absolutely. Like this just to kind of wrap this one up, this reminds me of, when people say I always attract X. I always attract Y. It's like, no, I've had experiences with X and Y in the past, but I'm not available for that anymore. And I think that is such a powerful shift because I think men and women, we want to be together. We do deeply. So that's why we're here.
Humans, period.
Yeah.
Humans they want to belong. One of our greatest desires on this whole entire planet
Yeah.
is to belong because it's innately in us.
Yeah.
From prehistoric, like we've lived hunter-gatherer lifestyles a hell of a lot longer than we've lived what we are currently living in.
Totally. Totally.
Away from family, totally isolated, separate, moving across country. Like we stayed in family units for our whole entire lives for literally, I mean, we're pushing it further and further back as far as anatomically modern humans go, like
Yeah.
120,000, two hundred
Yep.
thousand years in
Yep.
Africa. So, and what that meant for you in the past, if you didn't belong, then you perished.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
If you were removed from the group, then you died. Yet in our society, we always are talking about how we need to do it on our own.
Yeah.
Just think about how that just totally contradicts everything that we actually want to be inside.
Yep. Very well said. And I think like just to push it just one place further because of, Venus and Mars and why we're here. And this kind of conversation has been almost like another step in the direction of more harmony, more connection, more understanding. There is this deep desire, yes, for us to be connected as humans, but there's a deep desire to find the complementary energy. um there is, it's really real. I feel it. I think everybody feels it. And it's really there, this like deep desire for polarization, this like desire of sitting at the restaurant and like just wishing a strong man would walk in the door, right? Or a man that's like coming back from being away from people for a little while and then just like wishing for like this radiant woman to like walk up in front of him. I think this is like so real and innate to our biology, and this is what I want to explore in my life. It's just so important to me.
Yeah, I think it's what makes us who we are as human beings,
Yeah.
and that's that desire to truly be in contact and in connection with others.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what background you have, it doesn't, we as humans want to belong and we want to find a way to be in contact and to be in connection, to have relationship, to be in that
Yeah.
space.
I'm going to ask you one final question, Rob. I love this conversation. I just love your thoughts, and I love your groundedness. Every time I ask men what their favorite thing about a woman is, it's always radiance. Like, it's not really like attractiveness or beauty, like that's there for sure, or like intelligence, that's there. But there's something about radiance that seems to speak to men. Can you agree with that? Is that true for you?
A woman who's truly connected inside of herself, that truly understands who she is in the world, is absolutely radiant, in my opinion. Because that energy, it's pure.
Mm.
It doesn't feel so chaotic anymore. Does that make sense?
What a great way to say that. For you, radiance is a woman that is like deeply in tune with herself and the world, and is like living from that place.
Absolutely, because we need that as a society also. We may
Yeah.
have, dude, look, we may have a ton of work to do. We've done a ton of wounding. You know what I mean? We've perpetrated all
Yeah.
kinds of things. Absolutely, that's not to deny. And earlier when we talked about men having these issues, it's not to create a victimization for men,
Yeah.
because that just breeds more violence,
Yep.
which I think that's, yeah, I'm not going to go there, but going back into our Tate kind of conversation, if
Yeah.
you just place
Sure.
that there, I think that's part of why it's dangerous. But I also think that there's a call for women to also do their work.
Yeah. I love it. I agree.
Because I think that, for a long time, I've heard women say, men, you need to do, you need to do,
Mm-mm.
you need to do, you need to do. But then, like, well, what are you guys doing?
Oh, I agree. I think it's 100% like neck and neck, like parallel paths together. I feel like the greatest value I've gotten in my life thus far is from women's groups. So I love that.
I would say the greatest value I've got in my life is men's groups. Oh, and they're independent and they're in community. And that's how we actually come together in relationship. And then I've also learned a ton in mixed groups too, to feel
Yeah.
the energy of a woman, to feel what that expression is like. It's one of the most beautiful things that, I've experienced myself,
Yeah.
so I think that that's just also, really important, that it's a call forward. It's not a bash, just like
Totally.
and I think that that's the big difference, is when we start to point fingers and say, you need to, and you need to, that's when we victimize each other.
Yeah.
Whereas instead, like, hey, I love you, but can you just move forward a little bit? And we do that with
Yeah.
each other within our own cohorts, and then we do that with each other. I think that's where beautiful things can happen. So men doing it in community, women doing it in community, and then men and women doing it in relationship. And obviously that's being said in heteronormative terms.
Yep.
And that doesn't take away from anybody else that's in relationship or doing the work either.
Beautifully said. And on that note, that's a wrap for today. I've loved this conversation. I feel like we went in so many different places, and I hope you all have enjoyed another episode of Venus and Mars. Until next time.
Thank you again, Anya. Appreciate you.